Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. This week, we're wishing a happy birthday to WordPress as they celebrate 18 years. We're going to talk about how WordPress got started and touch on some notable vulnerabilities that we've seen and covered over the years, as well as what we see for the future of WordPress and WordPress security. Stay tuned. It's going to be a fun one. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Wordfence Live. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. Happy birthday, WordPress. Today, we're going to take a look at how WordPress and its security has evolved over the past 18 years. And joining me in just a moment will be Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain, two of our threat analysts here at Wordfence. And we're going to take a look at where it all got started with WordPress, as well as some notable vulnerabilities in plugins and themes that we've seen here over the years, including the first known vulnerability in WordPress. We're also going to touch on what we see for WordPress and its security moving forward. Remember to hit the like button below the video here, as well as the subscribe and bell buttons to be notified when we go live, which is each Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. You'll also get notifications when we post helpful videos to our YouTube channel. But don't worry, you're not going to get overloaded with notifications. We just post some here and there, and they're very helpful to set up different features and products that we offer. Let's get started here by bringing in our threat analysts, Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain. Ram, how's it going over there?
It's going pretty good. It's heating up, and I'm not going to go outside for the next 6 months. So, really like most of 2020.
I don't blame you. Definitely heating up and humid here. Chloe, what's up over there?
Things are going great over here. I've seen 5 moose in the past 3 days. I'm up at Baxter State Park in Maine.
That's terrifying.
Terrifying is when this giant moose literally ran in front of our car the other night, and yeah, that was scary.
A room with a moose is like the scariest thing I can imagine.
Yeah, I love moose. They're so cool and just giant, majestic creatures. So, my week has been going excellent.
Good to hear. Well, let's start off with something we all love, and that is swag. So you're going to be seeing a link in the chat. We ask that you answer there. It's going to be multiple choice, and you're going to see that the question is, when and where was the first WordCamp? Which I did not know until earlier today. But
me neither.
Me neither.
If you know it, go ahead. If you don't, go ahead and send over a guess. And if you're one of the first 5, you'll win the swag.
And hey, if you can Google faster than everyone else, you win too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So everybody has a chance. Now, Chloe, let's talk about where WordPress began and when it was first developed. Do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, so way back when, 18 years ago, Mole Mattenwig and Middle forked the blogging software B2. Did I get that wrong? Matt Mullenweg and Mike Little.
Close.
I like it better. I like your way better.
Yeah. They forked the blogging software B2 Cafe Log, and it turned into WordPress 18 years ago because B2 Cafe Log had actually stopped releasing updates. So they wanted to be able to have a platform that, continuously updated, making enhancements and things like that. And you can also add Christine Tremoulet to that list. Sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, because the WordPress branding was actually her idea. And I believe she was a friend of Matt Mullenweg, if I have that right. And so she suggested, the WordPress branding, and she's the reason that WordPress is WordPress today. So thanks to her as well. And at the time, there weren't any plugins. Most sites were either hard-coded, so, HTML and things like that, or developed from homegrown CMS. Blogging was actually just starting out. So, WordPress was at the forefront of, blogging and things like that. Today there's so many different blogs out there, food blogs, travel blogs.
I remember my first GeoCities website hand-coded in Notepad. It was awful, and I am so glad WordPress exists now.
Yeah, WordPress has literally made blogging and, creating a website for anyone really easy and accessible. So that's really great. And, it's come a long way from 18 years ago. And the main competition to WordPress back then was Blogger, which was purchased by Google from Pyra Labs. And Movable Type was the most popular blogging platform. And then when Movable Type changed their licensing, there was actually a mad rush to WordPress because I believe Movable Type was free and then they made it paid for, if I'm not mistaken. And so, WordPress, open source, free, everybody would want to switch over to that. And it's still free today, which is awesome. So on May 27th, 2003, that's when the first version of WordPress was released to the public as version 0.7. We couldn't go for something easy like 1.0 or, maybe even 0.1. But 0.7 was released, and that was after thousands of commits and renditions and, modifying, their original fork. And that was the first available version. So in 2 days... Yeah.
That's where it all began then. So we're 2 days early on our birthday wishes, which is unlike me. Usually I'm about 5 to 10 days late, but yeah. So we're early there, and then so there's more on Molenweg here, right, Chloe? What happened next?
Yeah, so in 2004, CNET hired Matt Molenweg to help them establish their blogs, and that helped result in the birth of Automatic and Akismet, which is the anti-spam plugin that you're probably very familiar with. And then after that, it was kind of all up. They raised funding and introduced all sorts of different features and everything that helped to grow WordPress to what it is today. And then in 2006, in August of 2006, we have the first WordCamp that was held in San Francisco, which I believe is where Matt Molenweg was living at the time. I might be wrong, but I believe that's why it was there. And I want to say that was the birth of, the WordPress community in a way, because, WordCamps bring all these different people together that have been using WordPress, and it brings everybody together to, talk and chat and, get ideas from each other. And then, you have talks and such. So WordCamp is a really great thing that was created. And if you haven't been to one, you should find one near you and go to it in the next couple of months. I believe we are getting closer to.
I think there's a typo in the swag quiz. Oh no.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, there's a typo in the swag quiz. Oh no.
I was going to say, Chloe, if everybody can't tell, we are pretty excited about the return of WordCamps. But talking about firsts, let's talk a little bit about the first known vulnerability in WordPress.
Yeah. So the first known vulnerability with a CVE ID that we could find was in version 0.7, and it was a SQL injection vulnerability. And there was also a remote code execution vulnerability. And, this makes perfect sense. 0.7 is the first release of WordPress. People make accidents, mistakes, things happen. So it makes sense that the first vulnerability was introduced in the first version. So that's when we have our first vulnerability in WordPress. There's probably more in there that, were discovered down the line. But that's where it started. And, as WordPress started to grow, more eyes started looking for vulnerabilities. Therefore, more vulnerabilities were found and patched. And so you could say that, people do and say that WordPress isn't secure, which I highly disagree with, because, if you look from the start, there was issues and such, but you have to work through these things. Things happen, as more people are looking, they find different vulnerabilities and all sorts of things, and things grow. So yeah, maybe back then WordPress wasn't secure, but it was new. It was just starting out. And, today I would say WordPress is very secure, and it's continuously evolving, and so many people are looking at it to make sure that it stays secure. So yeah, and then that brings us to the first critical vulnerability, I want to say, in 2006. Do you want to tell us about that, Ram?
Yeah, so as we were kind of like researching the history of WordPress vulnerabilities, we sort of saw this sort of mysterious CVE from 2006 that was rated a 10 out of 10, the worst severity that a vulnerability can have. And no one ever published any details about it. It's just been an ancient mystery. Well, Chloe and I looked at the diff, and it turns out that it's not that much of a mystery. It turns out that any site with open registration enabled, which at the time was about a third of all websites, anyone could register as an administrator, which yeah, that meant they could take over your site. So, it is kind of true that, WordPress hasn't always taken security that seriously. And it did kind of show a lot during those early years. When the vulnerability was first reported, they actually considered it like a user issue. It's like, why do you have your site configured in an insecure way? That's not our problem. But, they did fix it. Sanity won out. And for the most part, security updates have been made available reasonably quickly when issues are found. It's just that, they haven't always been announced very loudly. And there historically wasn't always a lot of transparency about the causes or mechanism of vulnerabilities. But, as since it is an open source project, as we've got more eyeballs, more security researchers on, the thing, generally that attitude started to shift until WordPress became, the much more secure core platform it is today. But things did kind of get worse before they got better, right, Chloe?
Yeah, so in 2007, something bad really happened. So we've talked about supply chain attacks a lot here, and what that would mean if it happened to WordPress and such. And as we were doing the research for today, it turns out there was a supply chain attack on WordPress back in 2007. I personally had no idea that this even happened until yesterday. But essentially, in version 2.1.1 of WordPress, an attacker was able to inject backdoors into the core of WordPress, and that could be pushed to people as they updated, of course. And so this backdoor made it possible for attackers to backdoor and gain remote code execution, which allows you to do things like make new files, delete files, access other sites hosted in the same cPanel. If there's a vulnerability on the server, exploit that vulnerability. So it was pretty bad, but it was patched. It was caught fairly quickly because WordPress is an open source community, and someone in the community found that there was this suspicious looking code in the core of WordPress, and they were able to quickly remediate that and get a patch out, and well, not a patch, but remove the malicious code in version 2.1.2. So that's actually a pretty big deal, and I believe there was a lot of sites hacked as a result of it. I could be wrong, but I believe
think this
so.
was the one that I think this might have been the one that got XKCD, Randall Munroe's blog, because I remember it was around that time that he complained about his blog getting hacked. So
Yeah.
And one of our developers here at Wordfence avoided another similar issue here, right, Ram?
yeah, it almost happened again back in 2016. Fortunately, our lead developer Matt Berry, who is just an all-around great human being, found.
Awesome person.
Yes, he really is. Like, we've learned a lot from him. But he found a cryptographic vulnerability in the way that the WordPress update servers work, to the point where an attacker could have inserted their own directions for where to download malicious updates. And it's a really good thing that, he got it responsibly disclosed to WordPress before that happened, because nowadays there's things like automatic updates. And instead of just, everyone sort of having to click the button or manually downloading that compromised updates, it would have gone out to everyone with automatic updates. But again, we stopped it before it happened. The great thing about supply chain attacks is that if you stop them before they happen, you don't have to worry about everyone updating to a patched version. You only have to update the source. And I mean, realistically, the whole period from 2008 to 2011, we kind of saw a lot of fixes in core. There was a lot of cross-site scripting, a lot of SQL injection vulnerabilities that got found pretty much every other update. That was sort of the era when WordPress started to mature and become a dominant CMS. But, it did have kind of a hard time shaking its reputation as an insecure platform. And it's ironic because that's when they started really taking security seriously in core and really, improving the response to issues. And, you can really see that this to some extent by the fact that, by 2011, core was no longer the main target of most attacks. That had moved to plugins. And you may have heard of this one because it's quite famous, but the Tim Thumb vulnerability in 2011 is really indicative of this shift. That was the vulnerability that caused our CEO, Mark Monder, to start Wordfence. His site got hacked, and he found that there was a vulnerability that had been attacked in the Tim Thumb file. which is basically used for processing images. Turns out that, if as an attacker, you could basically, stroll up to Tim Thumb and say, hey, I want you to, cache this image. It's right over here. And by the way, this image just happens to have a PHP shell in it. Ignore that, but please include it and run it. But yeah, from 2011 to 2014, that was basically one of the most hacked vulnerabilities. I think someone did a study at some point and found that like 90% of the websites that had Tim Thumb installed had been hacked. I'm guessing those other 10% probably had Wordfence installed. But yeah, huge thing. And part of what made the distribution of Tim Thumb so prevalent is that it was actually included in a larger number of themes. A similar issue, a similar sort of widespread distribution plugin vulnerability that, was also hacked during that era in 2014 was the Slider Revolution or Revslider, which allowed attackers to download your WordPress config file. And here's the thing, if an attacker has your WordPress config file, they have your database credentials. And if you're on shared hosting, chances are your hosting company has a publicly accessible portal where you can, log on to the database for a given site. And as long as you have those credentials, you can get in. And once you're in, you can do stuff like create new administrators, add stuff to posts, whatever. So yeah, those vulnerabilities are still widely attacked. Like we still see large amounts of attacks against them. It's not even funny. And they've been around for, 10 years in the case of Tim Thumb. So yeah.
Yeah, that Revslider one, I think, still gets exploited quite a bit, right?
Oh yeah, I want to say we've seen millions of attacks over the past year against the Revslider one, and I want to say a few million against Tim Thumb as well, just because the classics never die.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully, at this point, I'm pretty sure that every unprotected site with either of those has probably been hacked by like 10 different people. But
multiple times. Let's jump ahead, Ram, a little bit. Now, 2016, you were cleaning sites at this time, right?
I was actually. It was not with Wordfence, but one of the things that we saw a lot was in themes becoming common targets. That's because themes started to add new functionality, stuff like that, to kind of make up for what plugins weren't doing at the time. And one of the most popular premium themes at the time was the newspaper theme, and there were a number of other themes by the same provider that actually had the same or a similar vulnerability, but this was a result of the theme having an unprivileged AJAX action that let people update basically the JavaScript that you'd use to, if you want to embed like Google ads into your site or something, which a lot of people do because they want to monetize. Well, this allowed you to do that programmatically, but it also let attackers, add their own JavaScript to your site and run their own malicious ad campaigns on your site. And all of a sudden, it wasn't, your ads running. It was some, attackers' ads with, sketchy sites. And they were making money off of your site. We also saw a lot of cases where, attackers would try to monetize this by, redirecting, visitors to malvertising sites instead of advertising directly on the victim site. But, this is when we really started to see, monetization being like the primary motive for attacks. I will say that, there was one last gasp of, hacking for the lulz, as they say, which we will get to in our next section. But this is, I think, one where we really started to see monetization being like the prime motive for these kind of attacks.
So let's jump ahead to 2017. Let's talk a little bit about core here.
Okay, so I want to say that the last really widely exploited core vulnerability was in WordPress 4.7 when WordPress came out with the REST API. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, the REST API is basically something that allows you to programmatically do stuff like publish posts, edit posts, manage posts, manage other plugins, all that stuff. But when it first came out in WordPress core in 4.7, they didn't really check permissions quite as well as they should have. And the upshot of this was that it meant that people like Bala Sniper and Muhammad Ahmad could also publish and update your posts. And we saw a huge rash of defacement campaigns. Some of you might remember the catchy like music videos that came with some of these defacement campaigns. But if you don't, that's sort of a site cleaning, bit of site cleaning lore. Kathy knows what I'm talking about.
And you don't see it as much anymore, huh?
Yeah, no, that was the last time defacement campaigns were really a big thing. And that was also the last time there was really a widely exploited vulnerability in core. So, I want to say that things actually have been more or less getting better almost entirely since then, but with a few speed bumps, especially speed bumps where, it's not something that, the site owner necessarily has control over or doesn't know about the fact that they have control over.
So
Sometimes
we're
the call
talking
comes from inside the house.
my favorite title so far. So Chloe, sometimes it's not always an outside attacker, right?
Yep, exactly. So back in 2017, you may remember this if you follow the Wordfence blog at all. And it feels like just yesterday, and I can't believe it was in 2017 at this point. There was this guy named Maison Soiza that was going around and purchasing WordPress plugins and actually injecting malware into them that would make it possible to update pages and stuff to put advertisements on sites. So basically what had happened is it's a supply chain attack. He purchased up a bunch of plugins that, were widely installed. So the first one was display widgets that had 200,000 installs, I believe, at the time. And put this malicious code in there for advertisements so that he could make money. This was a pretty big deal back then because I feel like it's like one of the first times we've actually seen something like this. So basically someone buying up plugins and putting bad stuff in it. And so this started when we found it in display widgets, and then, our research team found, other plugins and such, and then a whole investigation launched. And if you want to read more about it, we'll share 3 links with you. We had 3 different articles that go in depth about what exactly happened. But this was like kind of the first time that we really saw something like that happen. And it makes you rethink, who you're trusting, and, makes you monitor plugins a little bit more. And again, WordPress is open source. So it's great that it's open source so we can see these things in these plugins and themes and such, to be able to track it down and then, find out who's doing it and stop them from continuing to do it. So sometimes the call is coming from inside the house. And the next thing that we saw that was sort of similar to this, not completely the same thing, but in 2019, there was this huge Pipdig scandal. And essentially what had happened is a developer put some vulnerabilities in there intentionally, it seems like. And the first one made it possible to reset passwords. So, the developer could come in and reset a password for a site and then log in. The second one would wipe a database clean. So that's pretty bad. And then the third one would actually make remote calls. And it looks like it was being used to DDoS competitor sites. So basically, these people were trusting this developer, installing this plugin and theme onto a site, and their site was being used to perform illegal activity essentially and send requests out to sites to try and take them offline. So effectively you're installing this malware on your own site and you don't even know it because you trust the developer. And so that was the second kind of thing that we saw. And those 2 were pretty big deals because it's just you don't see it that often. And so that's why we wanted to include it on the timeline, because it was a pretty big deal at the time. And then there is WPVCD. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Ram, and what that is?
Yeah, speaking of installing malware on your own site, you might have read some of our research on WPVCD, which is a malware strain that's basically spread via the installation of pirated plugins and themes, or nulled plugins and themes. Basically, if you find a cheap or free version of a premium plugin or theme, chances are it's also bundled with some malware. WPVCD is the most prevalent strain of this malware. It's been around since, I want to say, 2016 at least. But there are others. In 2020, we actually found more than 200,000 sites with, nulled malware installed, and 150,000 of those sites were basically from WPVCD. A lot of the time, it's, a developer trying to, save a little bit of money. A lot of the time it's, hiring someone from like Fiverr or something, and they're trying to cut some corners. And, get the premium features of like, a theme builder or something like that. So yeah, a lot of the time, a lot of the threats to WordPress are, this kind of issue where it's not something that an outside attacker is necessarily, compromising the site. It's where, someone on the inside is actually finding some way to smuggle, malicious code in. But, even in cases where that's not the case, there are still external vulnerabilities that can have a huge impact. I kind of feel like that brings us to 2020. We found a lot of vulnerabilities in 2020, didn't we, Chloe?
Oh yeah, 2020 was a fun year.
It was.
All that time at home.
Yeah, and I feel like the overall state of WordPress security really kind of advanced a lot in 2020. Used to be you couldn't throw a rock but without finding a dozen vulnerabilities in some sort of plugin with a massive install base. But there was one that really stood out, and that was the File Manager vulnerability. So File Manager was a plugin installed on more than 600,000 sites, and this was introduced because the file manager developers basically used a third-party library, but the third-party library basically came with a demo file of hey, here's how you use our little file manager connector to manage files on your websites, and it didn't require any access control or anything. They basically just forgot to get rid of the demo file. But here's the problem: that demo file, it didn't matter if the file manager plugin was deactivated or not. If the file manager plugin was installed on your site at all, someone could use that demo file to upload malicious code onto your site and execute it and take over the site and use it for whatever they wanted to. So this is really kind of a really important way of displaying that if there is a problem, if there is a vulnerable plugin on your site, delete it completely. Don't just deactivate it. You do need to delete it completely, just because a lot of the time it might be possible for attackers to access it anyways. Also, if you are running Wordfence, which I really would like you to be, make sure you optimize the firewall, because with something like that where a file can be accessed directly without letting WordPress, the optimized firewall will protect you against that. If the firewall is not optimized, then Wordfence doesn't run until the rest of WordPress runs. And then something like that, you might not have the same protection. So
now, Ram, how common is it to see a plugin that can be exploited while it's inactive or deactivated on your site?
I want to say we've seen, 3 or 4 over the past, year and a half like that. And they've all been fairly, high severity. So it's not super common, but when it does happen, it's almost always just absolutely critical. Because anything that can,
with that sort of functionality like File Manager, you're better off just deleting it if you're not going to use it for a little while.
Exactly.
Okay. So we're going to head into a little bit of a recap and anything that we might have missed here. But first, we want to say thanks to everybody who stopped by. Rick, thank you for the kind words. We appreciate you stopping by. Susan, Kristen, Duke. We got Dave in here. Paul, thank you. We always appreciate it. And, the same goes out to our premium subscribers, which I suspect a handful or many of you are. It allows Chloe and Ram and our threat intel team and the rest of our team to do the sort of work that we do. And Chloe and Ram have both mentioned, sort of how WordPress core and the plugins and everything is trending in a good direction here. And, when you have Chloe and Ram digging at your plugin and code all the time, that will help. And, we may not have said it earlier, but, sometimes plugin authors and programmers and coders, they make mistakes, and that's going to be expected. But it's, how quickly they get back to our threat intel team or another threat intel team to make these changes and keep everybody safe. That is really important. So, Ram, did we miss anything here? Is there anything that you want to summarize? It's been 18 years. I think we could have spent about a whole day going through
man,
this,
yeah.
right?
There have been thousands of vulnerabilities found. And you know what? Probably thousands of vulnerabilities that got patched silently, but without ever really being noticed or exploited, just sort of got replaced because, the code got updated without anyone even noticing it was vulnerable. Just got fixed by better best practices. But I mean, WordPress core has seen a lot of security issues, but it's also seen a lot of improvements over the past 18 years. I feel like their focus on security is much improved since the beginning, and there's a big focus on keeping the community safe while providing a platform where you can, you can write, you can sell items, you can do pretty much anything you want with WordPress at this point. And I mean, sometimes it is hard to avoid vulnerabilities from happening. So, responding is really the thing. Have a response plan. Figure out what you're going to do if something does go wrong. And, if you can help prevent things like using a firewall, that's also super useful. And I mean, Chloe, I think you might have a little bit more to add on this.
Yeah, so like you said, there's a lot more vulnerabilities that we didn't cover and such, but, we tried to cover, some of the major highlights, maybe not highlights, maybe lowlights of the past 18 years. And, things are only getting better. For example, WordPress has a bug bounty program on HackerOne. So researchers that find vulnerabilities in WordPress core can report them to to the WordPress security team through HackerOne, and they'll get paid out for their findings. So these researchers are incentivized to, look for these vulnerabilities in core and then disclose them to WordPress so that they can patch it and then get it protected and such, so that, all the WordPress users are safe. And so I would like to think that, a lot more people are going to be reporting it so that they can get their money. And you're going to have a lot more people looking at WordPress so that they can earn money, because there's a lot of, bug bounty hunters out there and such. And in addition to that, I've spent a lot of time looking at core, and I believe RAM has too. And, I've looked at REST API endpoints, XML RPC, looking for SQL injection vulnerabilities, all those sorts of different vulnerabilities. And I don't really find anything obvious, at least. So that is good in saying that, there's definitely not a lot of, easy vulnerabilities to exploit in core at this time. I'm not going to say that with 100% certainty, because, I miss things, and there could be something really obviously easy I'm missing, but I want to say that I am fairly sure there's not. And that's good, because you're not going to see you're not going to see back when you're not going to see a registration vulnerability that allows someone to register as an administrator if user registration is open. That's just probably a thing. I don't want to say probably. It is a thing of the past. I want to say you have so many different people looking at it. You have, an amazing security team staying on top of it. You have people, independent security researchers looking at it. You have developers looking at it and everything. So even if there is something critical like that, it'll be patched immediately. And, that's something to keep in mind, that security from the beginning to now has improved so much. And I want to say I'm very confident in the security of WordPress, and, what might not have been in 18 years ago is what we have now. So, back then less security, but, everybody's human again. But now things are really good and secure. I feel like I'm saying weird things.
It's all right. Like core is good. Like, we'll see a security update, every month or two. Like, I think this last one, there was some sort of XML external entity, but even with stuff like that, the stuff that gets fixed is like, hey, it requires author privileges to exploit, and it only happens on PHP 8, which no one is using yet. And it requires all sorts of the planets have to be aligned, and the moon has to be in, I don't know which constellation. Like the kinds of vulnerabilities that are happening in core are becoming a lot more specific and a lot more requiring special circumstances to exploit.
Yeah.
Chloe, I feel like what you were getting at there was Wordfence has your back through all of this, no matter
Thick
what
and
is
thin.
happening with WordPress. And you worked on our site cleaning team. You can kind of say, that you're confident that we're going to have your back there if your site is compromised, right? I mean, we take some serious precautions the whole way through the process. And, I've been asked in support a few times by people who are interested in a cleaning or an audit, is this just kind of a Wordfence scan on my site? And it couldn't be further from that. We have people that are looking over everything on your site. And if there is malware on the site during an audit or a cleaning, it's going to be found and it's going to be removed, and you have 1 year of a guarantee with that. And again, that goes with the audit as well. So if you're maybe just seeing some odd things on your site and you're not sure that it's fully hacked, you can move forward with an audit. And Chloe, if we do find something during an audit, we switch you over to a cleaning for free, right? There's no additional charge on top of that.
Yeah, correct. And then for a whole year after that, if you get hacked again and you followed all of our recommendations, your site will be cleaned free of charge. So that's really cool and a really awesome feature that we added a few months ago that I feel like should be shared more.
Now,
Yes, it's a 59-point inspection, right? That's a lot of
59
points.
points. Yeah.
yep, that is a lot of points. I've had some people that follow up and ask, what do we ask you to do on the site as far as what we send you in our report to get that 1 year guarantee? And it's primarily, changing some passwords, right? Anything that we detail that needs to be updated on the site. There's nothing that between yourself and your hosting provider or your IT team or a developer that you won't be able to manage, right? There's nothing too difficult in there.
No, not at all. So like using SSH instead of FTP, or making sure that you have all your users on your account are real users that are actually active, because you don't want to have contributor accounts laying around and such that could be used as vectors for some of the contributor plus vulnerabilities out there with like a really insecure password. And then there's things like updating, make sure that PHP is up to date, making sure that those sort of things are there. And it's all stuff
Multi-factor
that,
authentication is good too.
yeah, yep,
Yes,
that
and
one
it's
for
free.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of great points in there, and it'll make your site more secure, and then you'll have a guarantee that you won't get hacked. And then one thing we wanted to mention is K through 12 schools. You can get this totally for free, and that's pretty awesome. So you should definitely tell anybody that that has a WordPress site and is working with K through 12, or if you are working with K through 12, that you get a site audit immediately because it's free, and it'll make sure that your school site is more secure.
Yeah, initially this was for US-based K through 12 schools only, but we have since expanded that thanks to the support that we've gotten. So if you know somebody running a K through 12 school, or you're part of a K through 12 school and you have a WordPress site, send us a message. We have a form. I believe we have a blog post that we will post there in the chat so that you have the information on that, and we'll get back to you quickly there and give you a hand. I saw a comment come over about Wordfence Central saying it's the best free service that money can't buy. And I would be quick to agree with you there. Now, okay, so we covered a lot of time here. We did quite a bit of time traveling. Let's continue that and look just a little bit into the future here with what we kind of see coming with WordPress and security.
I see core becoming more and more secure.
Ram's seeing something here.
I see the plugins. I see the plugin ecosystem becoming more secure as well.
What do you
Sorry.
see with core, Chloe?
I agree 100%.
Ram has a good prediction, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Ram's prediction. Core is continuing to improve. The edgiest of the edge cases of security are being improved and secured. And we're seeing a more secure future ahead. And Ram, what about plugins and themes? Is that looking more secure? Is your prediction radar?
My prediction radar. Okay, so we kind of covered how back in even as early as a year ago, you couldn't really like throw a rock without hitting like some fairly critical vulnerability and
Ajax actions.
Yeah, like Ajax actions. But like nowadays, what we're seeing is that with any plugin with more than like 100,000 installs, like you really have to dig. In this brand new plugin space where they have like 500 to 3,000 installs, they're still fairly rampant security issues, but as plugins grow, they start to take security seriously because they have the resources to do so. And it's very rare for really large plugins to have any sort of obvious vulnerability that's long-standing. Like, there'll still be 0 days. There'll still be severe and critical security issues. But in a lot of cases, just like one of your recent finds, I believe, they'll have been things that were recently introduced by accident rather than vulnerabilities that have just been sitting there for the last decade.
Ram, I want to ask you for a reading on my future, but I'm actually kind of scared to hear that. I saw our producer Sean said Ramstradamus, and we also had a comment in chat from Adam, Ramrodonus.
I do not palm readings, tarot, by the way, but
okay.
Chloe, I think, what's your take on plugin vulnerabilities?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. There's still going to be 0 days and there's still going to be critical issues, but they're patched fairly quickly, and things are improving. And if it's a vulnerability, like you said, it's just introduced, and then usually it'll be picked up fairly quickly by a security researcher out there and then patched again. So things are looking really good. And what do you think about password security? What is the future of that looking like?
Honestly, I think that until everyone is using two-factor or multi-factor authentication, that we're going to start seeing password reuse and credential stuffing being one of the growing attack vectors. I honestly think that it's going to be the main way people break into sites going forward is reused passwords. And again, we do offer multi-factor authentication, and yes, we are hopefully going to have YubiKey support at some point because we all like them. But we don't have that yet, but still, use any kind of multi-factor authentication. That'll make your life so much more secure. I know I keep on harping on it, but it's really going to be the big thing for the next few years, I want to say. There's still going to be hosting account service vulnerabilities as well, but sometimes a hosting provider will have like an insecure configuration by default, or they'll just make it really easy for their users to set up insecure configurations, like stuffing a bunch of websites on the same shared hosting account with the same user. But there's still going to be intrusions, right, Chloe?
Yeah, there's still going to be intrusions. As WordPress grows, it's going to continue to be a target. We're already powering 40% of, public-facing sites. So, it's going to keep growing. And because it has such a large share of, the public sites, it's going to be a target. And, the best thing that can happen is we continue to improve the security of it. It's already really secure at this point, and, things will just keep getting better. And I don't think there's anywhere but up from here. So, things will continue to go smoothly, even though things will still happen.
Yeah.
We had a question from Dave about if RAM can see into the future for our swag winners.
I see.
Yes.
I see that our winner. I see a name, Daryl Carpenter, Ayan Farouk, Argyris. I am so sorry, I cannot pronounce your name.
That's a tough one.
Argyris Gokidis. I'm going to try. Anthony Stokes and John Francis. Those are the
Spot
names
on.
I see.
I think those were our 5 winners. Congratulations to you 5, and they look like 5 names I don't think we've had in the past as far as winners. So that's
Always good
right?
having new winners.
And of course we like our repeat winners as well, and we're happy that you come every week. Now, so supposedly there was a typo in the form. I couldn't find it. I looked a few times.
It was
while I
2016
was
instead
here.
of 2006. Yeah, we so the location was correct, but apparently the first WordCamp was not in 2016. It was in 2006. But anyone who chose the right location, I think, is who we got.
Well, we did that to prevent any Googling of the answer. Maybe. No,
Yes.
I don't think so.
And I mean, there are still going to be some threats to WordPress going forward.
Mm-hmm.
What do we see there? What are we going to be worried about here going forward in 2021 and on? What are we going to see as the biggest threats coming up?
Well, I think that you should all read my WordPress 2020 threat report because I think that we're going to see the same trends in 2021 that we saw in 2020. We are going to see a lot of, we call them brute force attacks just because it's a colloquialism, but, most of them are credential stuffing attacks. Basically, people trying to use stolen credentials to get into websites. Occasionally, they'll use dictionary attacks and even real brute force attacks, but, at 90 billion of them over the course of a year, that's a lot of attacks. So, only one has to work on your site in order to actually get in. And, plugin and theme vulnerabilities are still going to be fairly popular targets. We saw millions of those last year as well. But I do think that nulled plugins and themes are also going to continue to be one of the biggest threats, just because I think that we are doing a better job of educating users about the dangers of nulled plugins and themes. But I've also noticed that a lot of the providers of nulled plugins and themes are starting to shift their strategies a bit. They're starting to use things like, hey, it's GPL licensed, it's open source, which means that we can modify it by adding backdoors to it, and that's okay within the license. No, it's not. So be aware of those. I do think that those are going to be the biggest things we're going to see going forward. And just stay aware, stay safe, stay secure.
Yeah, don't try to cut corners with the nulled themes and plugins, because you're gonna make a lot more work for yourself, and then you're probably gonna need to have the site cleaned. And if you'd have just spent the money on the theme, so it's not going to pay off to cut corners there. Ram, Chloe, anything else before we have a few more things to talk about here, but did we forget anything?
It's all
Otherwise.
possible thanks to viewers like you.
Yeah.
That's right. Thanks a lot to
Especially
our
if you're premium
subscribers.
customers.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we really appreciate it. Our new rules that Chloe and Ram are putting out go out initially to our premium subscribers. If you're not a premium subscriber, go ahead and get on the Wordfence mailing list. That way you can get a heads up there and know that there's an issue in a plugin or a theme that you're potentially using, and you can get upgraded, as that is very important. Chloe had talked about our K through 12 site cleaning program. If you're not K through 12, if you are, it's going to be free for an audit. So if you know somebody in K through 12 space, go ahead and send them our blog post and link. If you're not K through 12 and you're noticing that your site's having issues, maybe you think that you're not hacked, but you want to have it checked. We mentioned nearly 60-point inspection of the site with our site audit. If we find any malware in there, we're going to switch you over to a site cleaning and just get rid of it. If your site is obviously hacked, then just go right to the site cleaning. You got a 1-year guarantee, so you're protected there. Ram, we had somebody mention Central. Why should people be using Central? It helps, right? It's easy.
Yeah, it's a great way to manage all of your sites, security configurations, and to get alerts when things happen on your websites that you might want to know about, including via like text message or Slack or even Discord. We have Discord support now, so if one of your sites has a scan that finds something really nasty and you're subscribed to critical alerts on Central, and it is free, by the way. Then we can send you a text message or a Discord message or a Slack message letting you know, hey, one of your sites found some nasty stuff. You should check it out. So yeah.
And Chloe, last but not least, we are hiring here at Defiant. We have a number of open positions. So click the link in the chat. You're going to see defiant.com/employment. Chloe, I suspect that your favorite perk of the job may be the free certifications, and we pay for the education, right? But there's a lot of perks. So.
Yeah, so I definitely think if you have the qualifications to apply for one of our roles, you should totally do it. There's no better place to work than Defiant and Wordfence. I may be a little biased, but I'm not that biased because this place is awesome to work for. You get perks like paid for certification and training. You can get a degree paid for. Granted, it's in the security space. You can, gym equipment reimbursement. You get $1,200 a year to. I bought a bike, for example, so I get to go biking around now. Yeah. So you can buy a bike. You can get a snowboard pass. Then there's so many other benefits like
coffee
healthcare,
reimbursement.
Coffee, yes. Yeah,
I don't know if I would put the coffee above the healthcare, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, we've got like the standard awesome benefits package that you usually only get with much larger companies. So but all the stuff we're talking about is just the additional extra perks. And we're also always remote and always will be. So
yeah, and we're very flexible. So if you enjoy working remotely and you're interested in that and you feel that you're qualified, you would have a flexible schedule there. So, okay, I think that about sums it up. Chloe, anything else?
I was just going to say, to add to the flexibility, I'm living out of my RV for the next 5 months because I work here. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you can do pretty cool things and explore the world and such as you are working for Wordfence and Defiant. I just wanted to say that.
Adam says that he's sitting on his sun porch. We had Brandon Godding sent over a comment. 80 plus sites he is using on Central right now. An amazing gift. We are happy that you're getting the use out of it. We are always putting time into Central and putting new features in. So we appreciate your support. Head over to wordfence.com and go to wordfence.com/blog, and you can read some of the posts that Chloe and Ram and the rest of the team are putting out. You can follow us on Twitter at Wordfence, and I believe you may see our personal Twitters in the chat at some point. Outside of that, I always recommend going to the bottom of the wordfence.com page and making sure that you put your email into the mailing list, as it may be the first place that you hear about a new big vulnerability, and that will help you stay protected. And until next week, right, Ram, Chloe?
Yep. And until then,
We'll be
listen to our
back.
podcast, because our podcast is awesome. I'm going to have Scott joining me on this week's podcast.
We'll be joining Ram for the first time, and that should be out Friday. And Ram is typically on there with Kathy, and that is every Friday. So if you have a moment, you can check that out on Spotify, iTunes, Apple, I believe, right, Ram? And
Yeah, I think
probably
Google's got one,
other
and
places,
yeah, all the normal places you catch pods, I guess.
Anywhere you're listening to podcasts, you'll find it. Until next week, we appreciate everybody stopping by. We appreciate our premium subscribers, and we hope that you have a great rest of the week. We will see you here very soon. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Wordfence. We have better hackers.